Hi guys, come on in. We have a new theater we'd like to share with you and new technology called waveforming. This is John Heron here. I'm joined by Arno Laborie from Paris. We're here in our Connecticut Training and Education Center. In fact, outside the theater right now, we have about 20 dealers who are being trained on RP22. If you don't know what RP22 is, please go to the CEDIA website and just give me your email address and you'll get a PDF of RP22. It's design guidelines for immersive audio systems, which I suspect most people on this podcast would want to be able to learn more about. One of the reasons we're here today is to introduce our new waveforming technology. We have an altitude 32, and we're using all 32 channels of it at the moment, because we have 11 speakers at ear level, 8 subwoofers. There are 4 in the front, 2 rows of 2, and another similar setup in the back to absorb the energy once it reaches there. And then we have another 8 speakers up top, which for the immersive audio people in the audience, we have the left and right, top front, top middle, and top rear. Plus we have a center height channel and a voice of God channel directly overhead. The last 2 being used with both DTS-X Pro and Oro 3D. So we're sort of format agnostic here. We're trying to do a great job with everything. In terms of amplification, we have a couple of our Amplitude 16 amplifiers running most of the room. We also have some new Ascendo amplifiers running all of the subwoofers.
The amplifiers for the waveforming system, the infrasonic subwoofer, which is a powered 32, has inbuilt amplification and DSP capabilities. So these amplifiers you see down here are the amplifiers running the 4 front 21-inch subwoofers and 4 back 21-inch subwoofers to create the waveforming. And you can familiarize yourself, of course, going to the Trinnov website, learning more about the waveforming technology. Each of these amplifiers has 10 kilowatt, 2 by 5 kilowatts, and that's RMS. And these amplifiers are very special because they are not sagging the power supply when you even provide the lowest frequency notes, even 2, 3, 4 hertz. They have linear output, unlike any other amplifier on the market. Even the Pro Audio amplifiers, they sag because they're not created to reproduce very, very low frequencies. And so we designed these new amplifiers to do exactly that. Now, in the entire system, we have 46 kilowatts of subwoofer power, and for the mid and high frequency system, obviously, we use the Amplitude 16s because they're very good amplifiers from Trinnov, very low noise, and the speaker system inside consists of a Black Swan left, center, right, and they're actually suspended, so they're a little bit higher because of the waveforming and the space needed for the waveforming. We choose this way. So the horns suspended right in the center of the screen, left, center, right, and the mid woofers of the Black Swan are then suspended above the Black Swan horns in this case. These Black Swans are powered by the Trinnov Amplitude 16. We like this amplifier because it's a very low noise amplifier, and the Black Swan horns have an efficiency of 117 dB watt meter. So of course you hear the slightest residual noise of the electronics if they're not really, really quiet. And that's not why not every amplifier is actually suitable to drive the Black Swan horns. And then the other speakers we're having here is 4 21-inch subwoofers installed, of course, in the Trinnov fashion, according to the Trinnov recommendations. You can check that on the Trinnov website. Then we also have the 32 down here. So there is a 32-inch subwoofer down here that is integrated in a way that we cross it really low to the 21s. Then in the back side of the room, of course, because that's how waveforming works, we have another 4 subwoofers, also 21-inch subwoofers here in the cluster to absorb the wave created from the front to the back, right? Then we have in the surround layer, we have 10-inch, so D10 on wall. And in the ceiling, we have also the 10-inch speakers, which are D10 wedge or D10 on wall. So we have 6 ceiling speakers for ATMOS, actually. And of course, last but not least, the room has been built by Officina Acustica from Italy, and I will now hand over to Peter Aylett.
Thanks, Jeffrey. I'm Peter Aylett from Officina Acustica, and in this amazing thing that we're doing here at Trinnov HQ in the States, we built the room. And when we say we built the room, when you walk in the room, everything that you see, and really, really critically, the acoustics, are something that's been engineered by us as Officina Acustica. We believe you need to start with the room. So rather than start with a list of equipment, the room is the single most important component of the whole experience. It defines how you feel when you're in the space. It defines what the lighting looks like. And really, really critically, it also defines how you manage acoustics in a space. You can have the finest equipment available to humanity, but that equipment in a poorly acoustically designed room is never going to perform to its best. On the other hand, you can have some relatively modest equipment, but very well engineered from a company like Ascendo. Put that in a fantastic room and it's going to sound really, really good. We as Officina Acustica take a very different approach to most companies that deal with acoustics, because we also take control of the interior design of the room, and we have our acoustic stuff integrated into the very fabric of the room. So rather than build the room and have some stretched fabric and then put acoustic panels behind the fabric, we don't do that. When you see the room and you see the room surfaces, the acoustics are built in to the very fabric of the room. And when you listen to the rooms, again, they feel different from most others. A lot of rooms that have been poorly acoustically treated, you walk into and you kind of feel like the air's been sucked out of the room. You feel like you've got a head cold. With our rooms, you walk into one of our rooms and they feel natural, they feel fresh. They're just really, really great places to spend time in. So the combination of companies like Ascendo that make fantastic loudspeakers, Trinnov with the processing, us building the room, that's sort of the holy trifecta of all of the things that need to come together for great design. And then once you've done really, really great room design, you then need to hand the room over to a great calibrator to get the best out of it. But with really, really great acoustics, that calibrator is going to have a much, much easier time of calibrating the room, rather than if they were presented with poor acoustics, where they'd have a lot more things that they have to fix.
We are showing the latest in audio innovation in terms of room acoustics, in terms of loudspeakers, bass extension, and we are also very excited to present our new technology, waveforming, which is based on active acoustics. So waveforming is improving the reproduction of low frequencies, and in any small room, any private cinema, low frequency reproduction is the biggest challenge, because the reproduction is dominated by what we call room modes or resonances. There will be some areas in the room where the sound will be very loud, and other areas where it will be extremely quiet. And because of that, the sound reproduction is massively non-uniform, and the listeners, they have a very different experience at every seat. And of course, this is not what we want to deliver. We want to deliver the same experience to every seat. And on top of the fact that the sound is not uniform, the decay is very long, meaning that when the sound is reproduced, reproduced, the sound stays in the room a long time. And the new sound that is reproduced is getting mixed with the previous sound. And it makes the reproduction very confused. So Trinnov has been working over 7-8 years resolving that problem, and this is the waveforming technology. So the idea is that we block the standing waves even before they happen. So we don't even give a chance to the standing wave or the modes to happen. We just block them from the beginning, even before they happen. And the result is that we achieve a consistency within the entire listening area, better than plus minus 1 dB.
With waveforming, because we're preventing the mechanism that causes the standing waves in the first place. Every room and every seat in the house is, as Arno said, very, very close to the main listening position and its response.
Yeah, this is really a new approach to low frequency reproduction. And the idea is to control what is happening in the entire sound field of the room in 3 dimensions. Up to now, we've been, the technology were based more on signal processing. So we look at microphone signals, we do some processing, and then we output loudspeaker signals. But here, there is a shift in the concept where what we're trying to deal with is no longer measurement points and loudspeakers, but we are trying to control the acoustic field. We are trying to control the acoustic of the room, and it's really like what we are doing is controlling how the waves travel through the room. And it's no longer a question of course we need microphone points to measure the waves, but really what we're doing with the waveforming is to create waves that are optimal for the room, so that the waves can travel through the room and then don't bounce off the back wall. And that's really the sound waves that we want to control. And the benefit of thinking in terms of sound waves rather than microphone points is that we control what's happening at the microphone points, but also between the microphone points. And it allows to control the entire listening area, and in that case, the entire room, to a very high level of precision, and being able to guarantee that the result will work not only at the measured points, but also between the points.
Yeah, to me, the consistency is hugely important if you frequently have the entire family watching a movie together, or maybe friends over to watch the Super Bowl, whatever it might be. Ideally you'd want a shared experience, so you want it to be as similar as possible for everyone. But to me, perhaps even more important is the reduction in the decay time at low frequencies. Low frequencies are so long that they're very hard to absorb with passive acoustics. You'd need, 3, 4, 5 feet of fiberglass in depth to start working at those very long wavelengths. And nobody's going to do that. So what we do instead is we, launch this nice, well-designed and created wave from the front of the room, and when it reaches the back of the room, we actively absorb it using other subwoofers. And that not only prevents the reflection that introduces standing waves in the first place, but it also reduces the amount of just low-frequency mud that's bouncing around in the room. And when you can get rid of all of that low-frequency excessive sound, things that has been bouncing around the room for half a second or more, you can suddenly hear low-frequency detail and dynamic contrasts that you maybe have never heard before. And it's quite striking. One of the things that waveforming does in order to create a nice uniform wavefront is we are steering the bass by using the multiple subwoofers to create a sort of a virtual subwoofer of all of them working together. The upper limit of frequency to which we can steer things is determined by how close the subs are to each other. They have to be within a half a wavelength of each other for us to be able to steer them effectively. So if you want to control things up to 80 hertz, they have to be this far apart. If you want to control it up to 120 hertz, they'd have to be even closer together because the waves are shorter. So it's the overall density of subwoofers on the wall that will give us the ability to control things as nicely as we'd like. And then once you establish that, how big the wall is determines on how many subs you need to maintain that density over the wall. Waveforming is somewhat demanding. It's not simply a matter of stick a subwoofer in each of the four corners of the room and push the button. It's a little bit more design work that goes into it. But the results are worth the effort, and it makes a huge difference.
First off, thank you, Trinnov, for inviting me over to the event. And of course, once I got home, the first thing that I did was popped in the exact same demos that I just heard at the Trinnov Theater. And I gotta tell you what, man, I thought my theater sounded pretty good bass-wise, but, having waveforming just kind of changed my expectations of what the bass should be in my own personal theater. Now, what was really interesting was they had us walk around the entire room with an SPL meter, which you can download on your phone. So I downloaded one for Android. And I believe at the front of the room, the bass kind of had a really big buildup there. It was hitting something around 80 dB, maybe 84 dB. In the back of the room was kind of like the biggest null, the biggest drop off, where it was something like 60 dB. So there was a big 20 dB difference between the front of the room and then in the back of the room. Now, once they turned waveforming on, what I noticed was wherever I walked throughout that space, whether it was at the MLP, at all 6 seats or 8 seats, whatever it was, or whether it was in the front of the room or the back of the room, the entire average was at like 75 dB, no matter where I stood, no matter where I walked. So that's a huge contrast between 20 dB with waveforming off and then waveforming on. So of course, I did the same thing once I got home, and not bad, for just doing everything manually. My difference in my own personal theater was 5 dB across the front 3 seats. The wing seats were, I think, like 4 dB difference from my main seat that I always listen to, but the one in the back left corner is about 10 dB difference. So, if you're in the front row and the back row, there is a very noticeable change in low frequency effects. Not terribly bad once you're in the front row, but the back row, you kind of suffer a little bit. Now, it did drop in A Quiet Place, which I've heard a bazillion times in my home theater. Now, the main thing that I've noticed was not only just the uniform bass coverage, low frequency coverage throughout the entire space, but just how clean everything sounded. Now, I'm not saying that my bass sounds boomy or just muddy or just not clean in my room, because it does sound extremely good. But playing back the exact same demos, whether it's Norah Jones, the Imagine Dragons, everything in the Trinnov Theater, when they turn waveforming on and off, with it on, the bass hits were just so precise and so crisp. It's almost like you couldn't really tell where the bass was coming from. I had in my mind that having the subwoofers absorb bass in the back, you wouldn't get a full coverage, like you would only hear or feel bass coming from the front of the room, but that wasn't the case. You just get a full 360-degree coverage of clean pressurization throughout the entire space, throughout your entire body. I'm sure the 32-inch has something to do with that as well, but that's kind of like the main takeaway here, is just that there's just the even, clean distribution of bass everywhere that just seems to bloom up from just out of nowhere. Like, you don't even know how many subwoofers you have in there. You don't know how big the subwoofers are. All that I could tell is that everything was so clean. The infrasonics just really pressurized the bottom end. Every time, there was, I think there was the Imagine Dragons, some other concert we saw at the beginning of the movie. Just the bass hits, just so snappy and quick. The cleanest that I think I've ever heard out of any demo, out of any subwoofer that I've heard personally in my home theater or any demo room. in fact, anywhere. And really quick, let me just touch on the Ascendo speakers that were in there. I know that I've had the 10s for a few months now. I've also had a bunch of the 6s. So 10s for across the front 3 in my home theater. I was also running, I think, like 8 or 9 6s across the lower bed channels, and the 6 inches for the height channels. And the biggest difference between that, because they were running the 10s, all 10s in the demo theater at Trinnov, and not that the 6s sound bad, but having 10s in every single spot just gives it a much more fuller feel to it. Not that the 6s are, bad in any way, but the 10s definitely have more oomph to them, which was definitely missing from having just the 6-inch versions in my own personal theater. Maybe the room has something to do with it, but I could definitely tell that in A Quiet Place demo, when the aliens are running across on the top of the ceiling and you can hear them kind of scurry across to the back left channel, the footsteps just sounded a little bit more fuller. You can just feel it more throughout the room, and it just had a bit more weight to it, whereas the 6s, a lot lighter sounding. So as far as going from all 10s for an Ascendo theater versus all 6s in an Ascendo theater, my bet would be, if I was going to do another entire home theater based on Ascendo, I'm thinking the bare minimum would have to be 10s, especially for this space. Maybe if you had a smaller space, like my older theater was, 6 are fine. But I think if you're going to go Ascendo in a medium to large size space, 10s or above are definitely the way to go. That 32-inch subwoofer just rocked, especially in that space. Not quite as good as the 80-inch sub, but 132-inch, killer impressive. Anyways, that's just my quick thoughts on the Ascendo speakers and the waveforming demo. Like I said, I can't wait to get waveforming implemented in my own personal theater. But if you guys have heard waveforming before, leave your thoughts down below on how you felt it performed. Did you like it better with waveforming on or waveforming off? Leave your comments down below. Like this video if you found it useful, and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you again in the next video.